From the people that I've talked to, and certainly this was the case with me personally, I'm not an expert, almost nobody expected Putin to invade Ukraine. It was unexpected. I don't know. I don't know
No,
what you were
I
thinking.
honestly thought, I knew he would do something. I thought he would do, at a minimum, would take the two eastern provinces and occupy them and pretend with a false flag operation, and then he would do to them what he did with Crimea. He would annex them. The next step, I thought he's probably going to organize a coup in Kiev, so get rid of Zelensky, get a pro-Russian puppet in there. But I did not think he would go the whole full extent, which he has done. And why did I think that? Because I thought he might run it. Putin, who is a ruthless dictator and murderous thug, he's also pretty shrewd. And so I thought he would look at that and think, gee, maybe it would be risky, it would be messy if you invade, there's to be civilian casualties. And I think that's exactly what's happened. He's invaded, and it's not been what he thought it would be. He thought he would be in and out, that he would control Ukraine within a couple of days, and that is not the case.
Well, so this is the question then. A lot of us really didn't expect it.
Correct.
Right? And so why did he choose to actually make the move as opposed to, what some of a very common mantra that I heard, including on a show, on Cash's Corner, a show I co-host, is that he'll come to kind of the 1-inch line, try to get as many benefits for himself as he can, but he's not really going to go to battle. Why did he decide to actually do it? What were the factors?
Well, I can't get inside his brain.
Yes, no, but you have some ideas.
Well, I've studied Vladimir Putin for decades.
Yes.
And if you go back and look at his life and where his ambitions have been, and he's been quite consistent about what his ambitions are. He was in the KGB during the Cold War. Soviet Union collapses in the late 1980s, early 1990s. He retires from the KGB, goes to grad school, and with an eye to a political future, he wrote a dissertation about how to make Russia great again. And the dissertation, he talks about taking Russian energy resources out of the hands of the oligarchs who were controlling them in the 1990s, bringing them back under the control of the Russian national government, investing in infrastructure of those energy industries, laying pipelines, and then Russia, controlling the energy, could use the revenues they would get from exported energy to rebuild the Russian social welfare system, the Russian military, just rebuild Russia. And then as well, having the political leverage they would have, that they would accrue. It's really funny. In the 1980s and 1990s, Ronald Reagan warned the Europeans. He said, don't you guys get those pipelines built. If you do, you are going to be dependent upon Russia. And of course, that's really what's happened. And Putin understood that. So he's followed that plan for 30 years in his political career with his goal, and he's quite clear, his goal is to destroy NATO. His goal is to break the back of NATO and to separate Europe from the United States, and in his mind, rebuild greater Mother Russia. Even President Biden said it this week. He feels Vladimir Putin wants to recreate the Soviet Union, and I think Biden is right.
It's fascinating that he's kind of everything you described in his thesis is kind of like what he has done. That's quite amazing. You hear about, for example, with the Chinese regime, you read Unrestricted Warfare, for example, and you're thinking, hey, look, they gave us the playbook ahead of time. It's like, but I think in America, people don't do that. They don't tell you everything they're going to do. They're going to tell you all the methods they used and how they used them. Anyway,
here's the thing.
Yeah.
Jan, don't believe what a democratically elected leader tells you. Often he'll say whatever he needs to do to win the next election. Always believe a dictator, because he can do whatever he wants, and he has no problem telling you in advance what his nefarious goals are. And that's the same case with whether it's Putin, whether it was Adolf Hitler, or whether it's with the Chinese.
So tell me about the role of NATO here. So why is Putin so bent on breaking NATO?
A couple of reasons. One, because he looks at NATO really as an instrument of the United States, and he has said in the past the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union, when overnight a great empire was destroyed. So part of it is payback time, that he wants to destroy the unit that destroyed his Mother Russia and the Soviet Union. But I think also he understands that, Russia doesn't have allies or friends, right? It has subject nations, whether it was during the Soviet era. None of those countries were equal to Russia. They all took their orders from Moscow. China doesn't have allies. China has vassals. What does the United States have that nobody else has? Allies, friends, like-minded countries. We don't all agree on everything, and we fall out all the time, but at the end of the day, our alliances are the strongest part of our national security, our economic security, our political security, our diplomatic security. And so I think that Putin understands that. And if he can pick us off one at a time, divide NATO, then he can get what he wants of a greater Russia, emasculate the European nations. And I think the Chinese have the exact same goal, that they want to pick us off one at a time. They are threatened by our alliances because our alliances are the greatest strength that we have. And so the way they get at all of these different countries is one at a time.
Interesting. Okay, and so with respect to NATO, I understand that Poland, Estonia, and a few other countries are invoking Article 4 of NATO.
4.
So what is that, and what does it mean?
Article 4 says that any NATO member that feels its security is about to be threatened can call upon the other NATO members to talk about it. It doesn't say that call in the Marines. It just says that it can call a meeting, so to speak. And I think that's what some of those countries, especially the countries on the Russian border, are now going to do. NATO is already meeting about this. The Russians, I think that if Russia has a success with Ukraine, that it looks like they get Ukraine without a whole lot of problems, then I think they eye the Baltic nations. Those three, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they're small. They're easily taken by Russia. If you look at a map, there's Russia, and then there's something called the Suwalki Corridor, which is like a road, and it's about a 2-hour drive. And on the end of that 2-hour drive is Kaliningrad, which is on the Baltic Sea. So Russia might decide, okay, Ukraine, done deal. Not a NATO member. Nobody really took me seriously about that. Maybe what I'll do is really try to break the back of NATO and then drive Russian tanks across that Suwalki corridor, and then all of a sudden, within a day or so, could control Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and then tell NATO, okay, what are you going to do now? And then would NATO, I don't know. Would NATO rise and go to war with Russia? I don't know. Would Germany be willing to jeopardize its energy relationship with Russia over the Baltic nations? I don't know.
Well, I guess, and so do you feel at this point, this war is expensive?
It is expensive.
There's with high energy prices, it's possible those might be lowered. Given that this is taking longer, at least by a number of analysts that have told me that, including yourself, than he expected, are any other countries actually under threat from Russia at this point, or is he?
Well, he's preoccupied with Ukraine, but what happens when he's finished with Ukraine? Well, you tell me. If the price of oil is high, he's just replenishing the coffers. That's why I think it is essential that the United States gets back into energy production, energy independence, and drive the price of oil down. One of the reasons in the United States we have such high levels of inflation right now is because of the high price of oil. It's the same thing that happened in the 1970s when there was an oil embargo where the Middle East countries stopped selling oil to the United States as a punishment for the United States' relationship with Israel. As a result of that, inflation went sky high. And I think that's what the Russians are doing today as a result of our energy. Well, the fact that we gave up energy independence, that's why we have inflation.
Well, what's really interesting about this to me, too, is that this is one of those things you could just turn on, fairly quickly.
Yeah, you could do it pretty quickly.
Yeah.